Welcome back to San Leandro Soundwaves. I'm Camden Robinette, and this is day 161, week 33. I'm going to be reading Daniel 1. In the third year of the reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came to Jerusalem and besieged it. And the Lord delivered Jehoiakim, king of Judah, into his hand, along with some of the articles of the temple of God. These he carried off to the temple of his God in Babylonia, and put in the treasure house of his God. Then the king ordered Ashpenaz, chief of his court officials, to bring in some of the Israelites from the royal family and the nobility, young men without any physical defect, handsome, showing aptitude for every kind of learning, well-informed, quick to understand, and qualified to serve in the king's palace. He was to teach them the language and literature of the Babylonians. The king assigned them with a daily amount of food and wine from the king's table. They were to be trained for 3 years, and after that they were to enter the king's service. Among these were some from Judah: Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. The chief official gave them new names: to Daniel the name Belteshazzar, to Hananiah Shadrach, to Mishael Meshach, and to Azariah Abednego. But Daniel resolved not to defile himself with the royal food and wine, and he asked the chief official for permission to not defile himself in this way. Now God had caused the official to show favor and sympathy to Daniel. But the official told Daniel, "I am afraid of my lord the king, who has assigned your food and drink. Why should he see you looking worse than the other men your age? The king would then have my head because of you." Daniel then said to the guard, whom the chief official had appointed over Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, "Please test your servants for 10 days. Give us nothing but vegetables to eat and water to drink. Then compare our appearance with that of the young men who eat the royal food, and treat your servants in accordance with what you see." So he agreed to this and tested them for 10 days. At the end of the 10 days, they looked healthier and better nourished than any of the young men who ate the royal food. So the guard took away their choice food and the wine they were to drink and gave them vegetables instead. To these 4 young men, God gave knowledge and understanding of all kinds of literature and learning, and Daniel could understand visions and dreams of all kinds. At the end of the time set by the king to bring them in, the chief official presented them to Nebuchadnezzar. The king talked with them, and he found none equal to Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. So they entered the king's service. In every matter of wisdom and understanding about which the king questioned them, he found them 10 times better than all of the magicians and enchanters in his whole kingdom. And Daniel remained there until the first year of King Cyrus. Now we look over our 7 arrows for this passage. What does this passage say? What did this passage mean to its original audience? Now we go over our 7 arrows for this passage. What does this passage say? What did this passage mean to its original audience? What does this passage tell us about God? What does this passage tell us about people? What does this passage demand of me? How does this passage change the way I relate to people? And what does this passage prompt me to pray to God? The prophets Daniel and Ezekiel addressed God's people during their time in exile. It's amazing that God even spoke to his people when they should have been receiving the silent treatment. They'd had plenty of warnings by this point, and were experiencing the result of their rebellion. But God continued to sustain them, even in exile, and provided them with gracious words of hope for the future. The later portion of the book of Daniel speaks of the end of times, when God will defeat Satan, sin, and death forever. The early chapters of the book show God's faithfulness to men like Daniel while in exile. The Babylonian king made every effort to dismantle the faith of the Israelite exiles, even changing their names to represent the worship of false gods. Daniel stood strong, refusing to give in to the onslaught of forces trying to turn his heart away from God. The nation of Israel was never able to resist the worship of false gods, at least not for long. But Daniel showed that a deep faith in God's promises was sufficient to fight the world's sinfulness and remain obedient to God. Thank you, and I'll see you all tomorrow.